Welcome to the Odds Breakers, number one place for shared, sharp betting information.
Welcome back to podcast 67 of 2020. I'm your host, Kiev O'Neill. You can follow me on Twitter at OBKiev. Follow us at the Odds Breakers. Follow us on social media / the Odds Breakers. This episode is being brought to you by mybookie.ag for a 200% sign up bonus. Please visit MyBookie and use the promo code ODDS200. Terms and conditions and location apply. If you'd like to help us out with our costs and sponsor the website and the podcast, we would love to help you out. Please visit theoddsbreakers.com, click shop, and become a member. For $24.99 a month, you can get my plays and premium plays before the line moves. If nothing else, please visit theoddsbreakers.com and become a free picks newsletter subscriber. My friends, thank you all for the support that you have given us throughout the year. You all have been amazing. We've added a lot of listeners to this podcast over the past few years, and we've added a lot of subscribers this year. So I want to thank you all for such great support. We have a great show for you today because we are going to bring back David Bearman, the deputy editor of sports betting at ESPN, to break down a great NFL card coming up this weekend. Before we get into that, we have a question from Josh about how to manage your bankroll. Josh is actually having a great year as far as his picks. 65% is what he's telling, but unfortunately, his bankroll management hasn't been proper. Maybe he's making some big bets on some games that didn't turn out, and the smaller bets are all in the games that do turn out. So that's very possible because that could happen to anybody, right? So the best way to approach this, and we've discussed this in the past, we just haven't discussed it in a while, is proper bankroll management and knowing how much you are supposed to bet per game. Before the season starts, you start with a bankroll, and you put a denomination for a 1 unit or 1 star bet, which is normally 1% of your bankroll. You go all the way from 1, 2, 3, all the way up to a 5-star bet if that's the play that you think deviates away from the spread the most, or if it deviates away from your money line number the most, meaning you think that this bet is not going to miss. For me, that's how I would do a 5-star bet. I don't think I've had one all year. I think I only use 5 stars if I literally know something factual that the bookmakers haven't picked up on yet and the betting public hasn't picked up on yet. That's for me. Some people do 5 stars for less, but for me, it would have to be something like Justin Fields' girlfriend just broke up with him and he is absolutely devastated, and I think it's going to affect the game, and nobody else knows about something like this. Or maybe Aaron Rodgers is extremely sick, and he's probably not going to play, yet that information hasn't been released yet. That's something that could make, for me, a 5-star bet. A 4-star bet is when I think I'm just way off what the line is telling me, and I just think my side is so right after I look into every single angle. Most of our bets are 2 stars, sometimes 1.5 stars, sometimes 2.5 stars. You'll get a couple 3 stars every single week, but that's proper bankroll management because it goes through the ebbs and flows of sports betting. You might think you have the best play in the world. You've seen lines move, the Patriots going all the way up to 10 throughout the weekend, and then them barely beating the Jets by 3. You've seen Kansas City lose straight up as a double-digit favorite at home to the Raiders. I mean, anything can happen, right? It's just the ebbs and flows of games, sports, right? Sometimes when a team is so bad, yet they just get a boost of confidence, their quarterback starts throwing dimes, and then the favorite is in serious trouble. That can happen, and it's very hard if you don't manage your bankroll and manage your plays like that. And a lot of times those situations happen when, teams will have a letdown spot because they just beat an amazing favorite or a ranked team. Maybe they're looking ahead to a division or conference rival. That happens, and that's where the art kind of comes in of sports betting rather than the analytics to try to find those spots. I'm very analytically driven, but you have to use the art from it as well. Some quarterbacks don't play well in cold weather. It's a little bit of art to know when a quarterback might fade out, right? There's an art to it to know that a team may be full of themselves after beating a great team and will let down the very next week. So that's just very general right there. But at the same time, you want to exercise proper bankroll management to get through those ebbs and flows. And that's what you use the Kelly criterion, which is 1 through 5 stars on all of your bets. That way you're going to make it fun. You're not going to screw up your whole bankroll and, be disenchanted by sports betting just for having one bad weekend. If you have any other questions about that, there's an article on our website called Introduction to Sports Betting 101. It covers that well. Otherwise, I'm always here to answer your questions.
You made us believe, put clothes on our backs. You sacrificed for us. You the real MVP.
Before we bring on David, I'm going to go through our college football Week 11 free plays. And there's a couple doozies out there. Normally, I'm actually going against the grain. What I usually do, I might be on some favorites. And this is one that I like. And we're going to go to USC. They're going to the University of Arizona Wildcats. Plus 13.5. It's about 14 now, I believe. When I wrote this down, it was 13.5. The total on this game, about 67.5. USC, they got a scare against ASU, and they could have lost that game. ASU just couldn't finish at the end and get quite into field goal range. Now, I think that scare is going to help them a little bit against Arizona. And I think they're going to try to make it more of a comfortable game for themselves. Arizona's not that good of a team. As a matter of fact, there's probably no better opponent for USC than to face a Kevin Sumlin-led Arizona team that has a ton of new coaches, coordinators, and new faces. Let's face it, Sumlin, to me, if you've been listening to the Odds Breakers over the last few years, is maybe the worst coach now that Gary Anderson has been fired. Not high on him. If you look at Arizona last year, they allowed 6.4 yards per play. I don't see how they're going to improve in 1 year there. They ranked 120th out of 130 teams, allowing 471 yards per game. Not even on that hard of a schedule. Obviously, they played the Pac-12, but their non-conference wasn't that bad. On offense, Grant Gunnell is going to come back. He was 14 TDs, 11 interceptions last year, 14-11 ratio, 60% success. He loses 3 out of 4 skill positions to start the season to throw to. Last week, they were supposed to play Utah. That game was canceled due to COVID. So they're prepping all offseason to play Utah, and then that gets canceled, right? So now they have to go face the top-ranked team in the Pac-12, which is USC. The USC and Oregon you can flip-flop them almost. But my power ratings have USC an 18-point favorite here, even at University of Arizona. So I think they win this one comfortably, and I do like it at 14. I don't like it so much at 14.5, but we gave this out at minus 13.5. This is a 2-star premium shared play.
You better lock it up. You better lock it up. No, you lock it up. You lock it up. Lock it up. Lock it up.
Please.
The next game we're going to talk about is Florida State versus NC State. NC State is laying 7 points. The total on this is 60. A couple things to stand out to me in this game. First of all, this spread seems kind of low. And maybe it's because NC State has been playing with their backup quarterback. But looking at Bailey Hockman, who's been playing the last 3 games or so, he's been serviceable. And he played pretty well against Miami last week. He helped beat Duke by double digits. Struggled against North Carolina, but they put up a few points. But if you're looking on the other side, Florida State's quarterback, Jordan Travis, has been pretty bad this year. 4 to 5 touchdown interception ratio and only 52% completion percentage. He's also questionable himself to even play this week. Florida State doesn't have a quarterback there. Face it, Blackman's horrible. They really don't. The biggest thing for me is that even though NC State is minus 0.2 yards per play, Florida State is much worse at minus 1.6 yards per play. That's a 1.4 yard per play net. Now, looking at the Seminoles and what they have done on the road, they've lost every single road game they played by more than 2 touchdowns. All right. So I'll take the short favorite here, and it's short when you look at what the Seminoles have done this year. I'm going to take them -7. I think this is a big play, and we're going to make it a 3-star premium shared play.
You're going to need a bigger boat.
Next play is by listener request. Mr. Zach Dean has asked us to talk about Army versus Tulane. -5, Tulane's laying. I think it's about 5.5 right now, actually. Total on this game is 48. This one stuck right out to me like a sore thumb when I saw it. And I was actually going to talk about this game before Zach asked us this on Twitter. I was kind of hoping. I held out like a day or two because I thought that there's a chance that somebody was going to hit the Army side because Army has been such a public team this year and it goes down to 3, but that didn't happen. So I realized I better get on top of it. Tulane has been improving throughout the year. Okay. They took care of East Carolina last week on the road last week. We actually lost that play. But I think it's more because they really figured out their offense and their defensive line is very, very good. Their only weakness is on defense against the pass. And that's how they got beat by teams like, UCF and a couple other fast-paced passing teams like SMU. But the fact that Tulane can stop the run makes you want to see who they're playing. They're playing Army. Army can't throw the ball. They are a triple option team. As a matter of fact, they've only thrown the ball 53 times this year, completing less than half of that, 23, with 3 interceptions and 3 touchdowns. They ran the ball 403 times. Okay, so Army's got a decent defense, allowing 4.74 yards per play. But they play teams like Middle Tennessee State, Louisiana Monroe. At Cincinnati was their tough one where they lost by 14 points. Abilene Christian FCS, Citadel FCS, UTSA, which is a bad team, a banged up team too, and FCS Mercer. Probably the easiest schedule in college football, if not, well, when you compare it to teams that have actually played a few games, right? Now they play Tulane, and Tulane, stat-wise, can stop the run. They only allow 3.04 yards per rush. Okay? And they've played some pretty good teams. SMU, like I said, UCF, Houston, East Carolina, Navy, South Alabama. Now, I hope you picked up on the part where I said Navy, because Navy is a triple option team. And when they faced the triple option in the first half, they shut it down completely, 24-0 they were winning. Unfortunately, Navy switched quarterbacks and started throwing the ball, catching them off guard the whole second half, and came back and tied it up and won by a field goal at the very end of this game. And that's because Tulane was caught. They were caught on surprise. Now, the fact that Army can't throw the ball, they don't have a good quarterback to throw the ball like Navy had, means that Army pretty much has their only chance by running the football, and that is into Tulane's strength. I like Tulane at -5, and I even like them up to -7 5.5 here. I think they win by 10 points minimum. I think this is a perfect spot for a team to show when you face the triple option once, you're going to do a lot better even against it the second time. We're taking Tulane minus 5.5 for 3.5 star premium play.
Show me the money!
All right. Well, now that we covered our 3 college football free plays, we're going to get into our guest, Mr. David Bearman. And now I'm excited to welcome back to the Odds Breakers the deputy editor of sports betting at ESPN and overall great handicapper, Mr. David Bearman from ESPN.com. You can follow him on Twitter at DBearmanESPN. David, the season's rolling on, but I'll tell you, there's been some cancellations already, and the week's been a little bit crazy, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's hard to imagine that we're already in week 10 of the NFL, and I would say week 11 of college football, but there really is no sense in putting a week on college football considering some teams have been around for 1 week and some teams have been around for 9 weeks. I always find it a little odd when I watch a football game and I see BYU, parentheses, 7-0 versus a team that's 1-0, but welcome to the world of 2020. But happy to be back with you and looking forward to another week of football, at least for those who are playing.
Yeah, we're happy to have you, man. And I'll tell you, it's going to shake things up even more. And sometimes you want to wait a little bit on some of these games, before you get some news. I think if there's a chance a game might get canceled, you still might want to hit it anyway because you might get some line value if it doesn't, if you're on that proper side. But I'm not making a lot of my plays until I have some more injury information, and some of that's COVID related now, David, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's funny because last year I was on a couple of shows and pods where my biggest gambling advice to people was to get out early and make those bets on Monday or Tuesday, get the best line, and then watch it move over the week and then reassess on Saturday or Sunday. And now it's almost impossible to try to beat the number on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday because you really have no idea what's going to happen, who's going to play, and sometimes it's right up until the games start in college football where you have no idea, as opposed to the NFL. It's pretty much more open. They've been very, very transparent when it comes to COVID, so you know what's going on, but that doesn't make it any easier, especially with college, and you have no idea.
Oh, yeah. They will drop a quarterback injury on you or something, or key running back, key linebacker type thing at the very last second.
Right.
That changes the line. I don't care. A quarterback changes the line. Head coach changes the line. The middle linebacker does a little bit, especially on the totals, if he's the mic calling the plays. So, yeah, that's the interesting part about it. I'm glad the NFL has been a lot more forthcoming with some of their information for the most part. And so, what was interesting is when the Ravens got all those guys called off the COVID protocol, that's when I hit the Ravens, and other people did last week, and thank goodness that went through. So be watching for that. Anything news-wise, following guys like Adam Schefter is something that he's on automatic on my Twitter, man. Just boom, he tweets it. He tweets, I get a notification. So, I always try to be ahead of it, and he's made me some money by doing that. So, huge thanks to Adam out there. Sticking with the NFL, we have some very good teams and there's some bad teams out there. Who's your top 5 power rated teams so far through week 9, David?
It's a great question, and I know a lot of books will have one of a couple of teams up there, whether it's Steelers, Chiefs, Ravens, Saints, some of the teams that have done extremely well this year. And for me, it's the Chiefs. You just look at the dynamic of that team, and it looks like they can score at will when they want to. And I know they're 6-3 against the number, which isn't the best in the league. There's a whole bunch of 6-2 teams that we'll get to in a second. But sometimes they just don't show up, and like they did against the Chargers where they had a rally from behind and win. But you see what happens when they play a team like the Ravens on Monday Night Football, and they go out there and pound them. One of the non-covers was against the Patriots in that tough game. But overall, when you look at top to bottom, best teams in the NFL, if I was going to pick one that I was going to bet on for all 16 weeks, and that's kind of how I look at the power rankings, is who I want, what side do I want to be on every week. It's the Chiefs. And yeah, they didn't cover last week against the Panthers, which throws a little bit of a blow towards that. The defense is, suspect at times, but I just think the overall, what they have in front of them, Mahomes and all the way top to bottom, Hill, as you saw last week, and Kelsey, it's the best team in the NFL. They know they're the best team in the NFL, and that's why I have them at the top of the power rankings. The rest are pretty much closer together. I think the Ravens deserve to be up there. Although they're not a covering machine, I still think when push comes to shove, they're better than the other 29 to 30 teams in football other than the Chiefs. I would want to have the Ravens. I know they lost to the Steelers in a tight one, but if I were to bet on a neutral field, I would take the Ravens over the Steelers right now. And then I have the Saints, Steelers, and Packers actually round out my top five. It's in that exact order, but I absolutely can understand if anybody wanted to move that around. The Steelers are undefeated, but they have 5 one possession game wins. You saw what they did against the Cowboys last week. It didn't look very good, so I dropped them a little bit. I was all over the Saints, who were number 3 in my power rankings. I gave that out on multiple pods last week and in our column that the Saints were going to beat the Buccaneers. I gave that out as a money line pick, and they did not disappoint. That game was over to the point where I didn't even have to watch the second half. I honestly think the Saints are the best team in the NFC. I had them as my Super Bowl pick versus the Chiefs before the season started. They did what they always do. They get off to a slow start. If you go back and look at the last 3 or 4 years, the Saints start off 0-2, 1-1, 1-2 with a fluke win against the Browns, and then they roll off 9 in a row, 10 in a row, 11 out of 12. At the end of the day, the Saints are going to finish at 12-4 or 13-3, and I think that's a team that you want to be on. You look what they did to the Buccaneers and in Tampa with a team that everybody was putting as the Super Bowl champion with Tom Brady. So I think the Saints are the class of the NFC, and that's why I have them a little bit ahead of the Steelers and Packers, which rounds out my 5. It's hard to not have the Steelers up there considering they're undefeated, but they haven't really impressed me, and they've struggled to beat the Eagles. They struggled to beat the Cowboys. The most impressive win by far is their defeat of the Ravens, which is why they're as high as they are. But it's not a team that I'm expecting to go 16-0.
Agreed. I mean, the Ravens did outgain the Steelers by a lot of yards.
Correct.
That game, Steelers, defense, turnovers and stuff like that. That's Lamar's crutch. Can't turn over the ball. He's got to make it happen when he's rolling out. Mine's exactly like yours, I think. I have Kansas City number
good.
That's good. I mean, that is good.
Or bad.
Well, I'm hoping it's good because I think the consensus agrees with some of the sharp people I talk to. Kansas City number 1 for sure. And I have a point better than the Baltimore Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens are kind of the most powerful team. I think when it comes to being a home favorite, I would trust the Ravens over KC. For some reason, KC is a better road team than a home team. They just get a little lazy, like you said, and they deserve to be being the Super Bowl champions and stuff. And then when they want to turn it on at the end, they do. And so very true for them. I actually have Green Bay, Pittsburgh, and New Orleans tied right now, all for 3rd, which you can just say 3, 4, and 5, however you want to do it. And Pittsburgh, what sucks about what happened with the Cowboys is we were waiting for a spot to go against Pittsburgh, but we couldn't take them against the Cowboys. I mean, there's people that have, and congratulations to them. It's just the Cowboys went in utter quarterback disarray, and what do? Almost beat them flat out. So now the value might be gone when the Pittsburgh Steelers play again, right? So that was kind of tough for the betting crowd there. Saints, yeah, you're right. They are turning it on. Both of us were on the Saints on the spread and the money line. We texted a little bit about that last week. So congrats to you on that one. Congrats to both of us, I guess. And I was thankful they hit the under that game because they didn't hit the under. Tampa Bay hit the under for us for not scoring at all.
Hey, good under. If it's 31-0 at the half, you still cashed it. So,
yeah, 31-0 is when you definitely lean under and you feel good about it because you know they're good. They're going to run the ball, and they just need to keep the other team out who's going to play on the back of their heels. So, when it's a closer game, like a let's just say it's a 17 to 14 game, then you don't like that 51 under because that game they're going to be shooting back and forth, and anything 31-0 is when you run. So a little word for our people that like to bet second halves there. Well, cool, man. Glad we match up on that. What are your thoughts on MVP then in the NFL so far? Let's see if we match up there.
Much like my love for putting the Chiefs number 1, even though they cost me in parlays and teasers last week, hitting them against the Panthers. But to me, just like the Chiefs, I have Pat Mahomes up there. I don't think there's a better player in the NFL right now. It's not only good, but carrying a team, and the numbers are just insane. If you actually sit down and think about it, 2,700 yards pass offense, 25 touchdowns to 1 interception. Those numbers are ridiculous. And if you max that out over 16 games, you're looking at, 5,000 yards passing, 50 touchdowns, and 1 or 2 picks. Those are Aaron Rodgers type numbers when Rodgers won the MVP. So I have Mahomes up there. I always, unlike the Heisman, which is always best quarterback on the best team, I look at the MVP as which team would suffer the most without their quarterback. And I think that is Kansas City right now. I think without Mahomes, that's probably, maybe a 9 or 10 win team. With Mahomes, they can go 15-1 to win the Super Bowl. After Mahomes, this might surprise some people, but I like Josh Allen. I think his numbers are great, and I think he's now beating good teams. It's always been, you can beat up on the AFC East bums, but can you beat anybody else? And they went in and beat Seattle last week after beating the Patriots in a must-win the week before to announce that they're there. And I think if he carries the Bills to a 12-13 win season and wins the AFC East and goes far in the playoffs, that Josh Allen could steal some votes in the MVP. And that's no knock against the other players I'll mention. It's just that his numbers are that good, and his team is winning at a rate that we haven't seen the Bills do before. But neck and neck with Josh Allen, I'll throw Russell Wilson in there. Obviously, a lot's been talked about how Wilson never gets any MVP votes. If you had asked me 3 weeks ago, I would have said Russell Wilson is unanimous MVP with what his numbers were, and how that team has absolutely no defense. And, he's not exactly doing it with all pro running backs and wide receivers back there. So I think just by what Wilson is carrying his team by himself throws him right up there. But the reason I have him third and not 1 is there have been some holes in his game the last couple of weeks. He threw a couple of bad passes 2 weeks ago. Did not look great last week against Buffalo. So 2 straight sort of off weeks for Russell Wilson drops him to me. But if he goes ahead and continues the numbers he's doing and continues to win shootouts with a defense that can't cover my son's flag football team, then I think Russell Wilson should absolutely get some MVP consideration, just like, he was unanimous MVP for the first 4 weeks of the season when they were undefeated, but they're no longer undefeated. And quite frankly, the way their defense is, I don't think Seattle wins more than 10 games in that division with how bad their defense is, and you saw it maxed out against Buffalo. If they finish 10-6, he's not winning the MVP. And the fourth name I have on this list, just because I think he has to be on the list, his team's 8-0. So Ben Roethlisberger right now is in the MVP consideration. His numbers don't match Mahomes, Allen, or Wilson. But you saw what happened when he was out last week and the team fell behind to Dallas. He comes back and drives the team to the win in the second half. And he continues to do that. And should the Steelers somehow go 16-0, and as a resident Dolphin fan, I'm obviously aggressively rooting against that. But you'd almost have to give him your vote if they go 16-0 because he's the guy behind center for that team. But I have him far behind the other 3.
Yeah, 8-0. I think that the coach has been doing really well there, and I've been down on him before. But even though it's an easy schedule, we saw this coming in that. The Steelers were going to have a very easy schedule. The Browns were going to have an easy schedule just for the conferences that they actually play. But you definitely have to give a lot of props to Tomlin there. And I was down on Tomlin before, but he's really impressed me the last couple of years. And Big Ben's getting rid of the ball really fast. And his stats aren't blowing it away, but any undefeated team, you have to have Tomlin as the coach of the year, and you probably have to have maybe even Big Ben, like you said, as your MVP. So great case there. I'm close to you. I'm gonna say Russell Wilson would be the team would be much worse in Seattle without Russell than Mahomes. And now I think the Chiefs are well rounded in a lot of positions. Now both of them have very good receivers. I think you probably even give the edge to Seattle there, but the Chiefs has been running the ball really well and they've been playing really good defense. But man, I'll tell you, when you look at the worst defenses, it's funny. You go, Minnesota allows 412 yards per game, Houston 416, Jacksonville 418, and then there's Seattle at 455.8. It's just that much of a discrepancy. Yeah. And I think it's the worst in history as far as pass defense. It's weird that they have such a good run defense, but maybe that's also because Russell Wilson's scoring and teams are passing against them. So I'm going to flip-flop with you on the top two. But I think we're close, and I think you're right that Mahomes did gain a little bit after the last couple weeks here on Russell Wilson. It's funny. I think Aaron Rodgers has a shot himself just because the Packers have been, with the danger of his arm, they're able to run the ball really well. And, he's kind of the leader of that team too. And I'd hate to see what the Packers look like without Rodgers itself. Right. So he's kind of in the top 5 probably there as well. All right, let's move on to the next one. We have a listener question for Notre Dame. He tweeted out at us, Notre Dame versus Boston College. He was curious on the total of that one, and I believe I'm trying to find his tweet exactly, but I have some thoughts on that. You know what's funny about the total? It's sitting here at 50. And you look at these teams, they both average 50 points a game. So, from a points perspective, it's kind of right on there. And his name was Spencer, that tweeted us that, by the way. And BC plays 20 seconds per play. That's 27 seconds. That's how long it takes them. The average is around 25 and a half, 26, so they're slightly slower. And then Notre Dame plays at 29 seconds per play, which is a little bit slower than that. Now, you got to understand that these guys also run the clock when they're winning, especially Notre Dame, so you can, take out some of the garbage time. They're a little bit faster per seconds. The thing that makes me lean to the over for this play, and I think it's the letdown spot for Notre Dame. They're high and mighty. They beat Clemson. Now they're going to Boston College. A lot of times the defenses do not show up as much in letdown spots and things happen. Well, this is a big get-up spot for Boston College. And we can't forget that Jerkovic, their quarterback, actually went to Notre Dame and left them because Ian Book stayed too long. He was sitting too long, and he had to go to another college where he's going to get some playing time. And Boston College scooped him right up, and he's a very highly touted 4-star quarterback. Well, that he's going to have a little bit of chip on his shoulder against Notre Dame, and Notre Dame being in that letdown spot. So I lean to the over 50 on this one, David. I don't know if you looked at this one. Have you?
Yeah, I would agree with that sentiment, and I also do like the 2 touchdowns. If you get 2 touchdowns with BC at home in an obvious letdown spot for Notre Dame, I do like that. I think that would lend to the over because Boston College is going to pull the upset. It's not going to be a 24-20 game. It would probably be more like 38-35. I do think Boston College can stay in this game, and if you can get 2 touchdowns with them and the over, it's something that I would play as well.
All right, well, there you go. We have some agreement there. Quick looking at another college that you brought up to me earlier, New Mexico. You know a little bit about that school. They've kind of in a weird situation now. Can you tell me what's going on out there?
Sure. Yeah. With the public health crisis, obviously in the pandemic, the state of New Mexico actually is preventing the Lobos, rightfully, they're not playing games at their home site or bringing in fans. But because they left the state to go play San Jose State a few weeks ago, they don't even want the players to come back to the home state without quarantining. So they've taken up residence in Nevada, namely Las Vegas, where their first game of the season was canceled against Colorado State at home due to the pandemic. They went on the road to California. The state guidelines won't allow them to come back, so they went to Vegas to train for a week before then flying to Hawaii for their game last week. And instead of coming back to New Mexico for their home game versus Nevada, they're going back to Las Vegas, and they're playing at UNLV's Sam Boyd's campus in their stadium to host Nevada, who's obviously further up the state in Reno. But they're playing a home game in the same state as their opponent in UNLV. So they're playing Nevada, but they're playing them at UNLV's site. So it's a little complicated. The point being, to me, that's a lot of travel and a long time without being home for the college kids. And you're a 19, 20-year-old kid, your base is Albuquerque and you've gone from Albuquerque to Colorado, to California, to Nevada, to Hawaii, back to Nevada, and you're not at home, you're not sleeping in your own bed. They're the true definition of road warriors. And, it being the Mountain West in New Mexico, I'm not sure how much that's known, obviously, with Alabama, LSU getting canceled, or Florida, Missouri getting canceled, or Florida, LSU, that becomes national headlines. But the Lobos have basically been on the road for a straight month. They got blown out of the water by San Jose. They stuck around versus Hawaii before eventually losing, and they're 17-point, quote, home dogs this week versus Nevada, who's 3-0 and looking impressive. So just something to consider, that the team has been on the road for about a month, not training at home. And even though they're listed everywhere as the home team, they're not playing in their home state. They're actually playing in Nevada, which is the home state of the Wolfpack. So food for thought, might want to lay the 17 there with Nevada, or at least maybe take a second half try when, that is what happened against Hawaii, is they got tired in the fourth quarter, understandably so, when you're traveling nonstop as a 19, 20-year-old.
What's funny is that as a 19, 20-year-old, I guess the worst place not to be away from home is Las Vegas. You probably get a little, not from a sports betting perspective though, because maybe you could get in a little trouble there. I mean, I'm guessing that the coaches are tight on the kids, and the kids know that they're not supposed to do some stuff, but it's hard to predict what's going on. It's not like New Mexico is projected to have some sort of a great year anyway. What's funny about the spread is that it was at 12 and it shot up to 17.5 now, David. So
maybe I'm not breaking any news then.
Well, you are, because a lot of people don't even look at the lines until Friday. So just make people to know that it was hit on. It was a sharp side for a while, but now that the limits are up, there's some people trying to middle it, and there's some people coming back on New Mexico. I'm not going to do that. I think it's a horrible spot for New Mexico. So that's some interesting thoughts you have about that game. But yeah, as a kid being away from home, you wonder how much schooling they're actually getting, from their college. They have to be doing some online classes, wouldn't you think?
You would think that, and obviously going from 12 to 17, that's a 5-point jump, and probably justified, because at home they're probably a 12-point dog. But now traveling back to Las Vegas, you just never know. So
yeah, totally. Well, let's get into some NFL games then, David. We'll start right away with Houston versus Cleveland, and Cleveland is about a -3, -120 from most of the consensus books that I'm seeing. The total on this game is at 54, my man. You know that Baker Mayfield had a little bit of COVID protocol. He didn't test positive, but he's isolating because he was near somebody. But there's a lot of pieces to this game. What are your thoughts?
There is, and while that would normally concern me, he also had the week off. So I'm not sure how much he actually missed since the team had the bye week. And I've gone on record many consecutive years as not being a huge fan of the Cleveland Browns. No matter what they do, they tend to disappoint. But in this matchup, I actually like them, because they're playing another team that I hate taking, and that's the Houston Texans, where Houston is 1-7 against the spread, which is tied for the worst record in the league. And their 2 wins outright are against the Jacksonville Jaguars. That's it. That's all they have. They have no other W's on their schedule other than beating the Jags, which is not exactly something that, that's not a resume that helps you out when you're two for the season. Your both wins are against the Jags, and they didn't even cover last week. So in my mind, if I were to rate these two teams, I have Cleveland much higher ranked than Houston. I have Houston as one of the lower teams in the league. Obviously, they're better than Jacksonville. And I think with a week off and hopefully everybody's healthy, I think the Browns come in there and take care of business for Houston.
All right. Well, this is a spot play for me as well. And I have the spread, just from a straight power ratings perspective, Cleveland -3.3-ish. But Cleveland's coming off the bye week, and that's where the upgrade kind of comes in for me as well. They're getting a little healthier. Nick Chubb's supposed to be back and play. That's going to help some of their running game. If they can just control the clock and time of possession, then this should be an easy victory for them. And they kind of need a win here. They've been taking a lot of criticism lately. This is the time to kind of step it up a little bit. I do like Deshaun Watson, but I think has been dealt such a bad hand since he got drafted. And you can say the same thing for J.J. Watt being on that awful team. No coach really now. I think that Houston is probably going to care a little bit more about their division games than they are going on the road. Their defense is the third worst. If you've heard what I said before, 417 yards per game. That's a lot. And I actually reached out to one of our colleagues, Ralph Michaels at Wager Talk. I was curious to him to run a Killer Sports inquiry. I run some of those myself. I have some other trend areas, but he's really good at that. I asked him what's the situation when there's the road team is on their second road game in a row. I can't even talk right now. Away, and he's an away dog. And he gave me 3 stats here. Over the last 5 years, a team on the road, after a road win, they're only 46.6 against the spread. So, that advantage is for Cleveland there. An away dog off an away win is 48.1%, a little bit better. But an away team on their second road game facing a team off the bye like Cleveland is only 41.2% against the spread. So that's 58.8% for Cleveland there. So that's a good trend, I think, in this situation. I think the Browns have some upside here, and I like them at the -3 for a couple stars. Any final thoughts?
I do like those trends, and to me, it boils down to, again, I don't necessarily like either team overall, but with Houston is being one of the worst teams to me. They skated by for years in a really weak division with a coach that was, in above his head. They finally got rid of the coach. They won a game after they fired their coach, but again, it was the Jags. Their division is now good. Not great, but better than it was. You mentioned their defense is just god-awful, and I think Baker and company have enough offensive firepower where, 3.3 sounds about right in terms of power ratings, but I see this game being more of a 30-10 type game, and I don't even think it'll be a sweat. I actually like the Browns here.
All right, well, there you go. That's a powerful statement there. Maybe J.J. Watt's going to be looking 90 miles 100 miles down the road, whatever, to Pittsburgh when he visits Cleveland this week. A lot of rumors about that. Let's move into another terrible game. Philadelphia versus the New York Giants. Sorry for all these bad games, but with all the COVID stuff, there's not a ton of lines out there. The Giants are dogs at home, +3.5. The total on this is 44. And I'll start here. The Giants, they had them last time, and they blew it in Philly. They really did. Mm-hmm. And then Philly just kind of turned it on at the end, and Carson Wentz won that game. Philadelphia is healthier now than they were before. They're getting back Miles Sanders. They're getting Alshon Jeffrey back. And they may be getting Lane Johnson and Darius Slay back. Okay? So I'm starting to monitor that a little bit more. All right? The Giants improved slightly throughout the year after losing Saquon and all that, but not really enough for me to buy stock in them. I don't know if it matters that they're an away team here with the COVID going on. I think the Eagles could put one on them, but my power ratings have the number exactly where it is. My power ratings have this with a small home field advantage for the Giants, a -3.5 anyway. So I'm not playing it right now. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, and nothing is foolproof in this business, but if you're in the habit of laying 3 in a hook with an Eagles on the road, you probably should think about getting a new career. Yeah. I'm not saying they can't get it done, and if the stuff was foolproof, we'd be doing this show from some island somewhere that we own. But I think you made some very valid points, and I have written in my notes the Giants should have won the first meeting. You're absolutely right. They dominated that game for 3 quarters, flip a switch, Carson shows up. Giants become Giants, and Eagles win that game and continue going. At the end of the day, the Eagles are going to win that division, whether it's 7-8-1 or 6-9-1 or whatever their crappy record will be. But the Giants are just as good as they are, or should I say the Eagles are just as bad as the Giants. They've actually been decent recently. You saw them cover against the Buccaneers at home, and then they went out and won last week at Washington, which shouldn't you don't get a gold star for that. But they are 5-0 against the spread as a dog in their last 5 games. As a dog. So they have some trends towards them. I think getting 3.5 in a division game at home versus an opponent that you should have beaten the first time, coming off of a couple of good games. To me, if you're going to look at 2 somewhat evenly matched teams, I would take the home team plus the points and just try not to watch it, but hold on for dear life.
All right. Well, there you go. That would be a smelly game to watch. Yeah. If you have something better to do, it's always recommended. But you're right.
And living up here in Giants Jets, and Patriot territory. I have one word for everybody: DirecTV.
DirecTV. There you go, man. Let's move on to a better game. The Tampa Bay Bucks facing the Carolina Panthers. And I wrote this at 6, but I looked today and it's at 4.5. So there was some Carolina money that came in. The total on this game is 50.5. What are your thoughts on this one, David?
So I've said from the offseason that I'm going to be fading the Bucks all along. I faded the win total and took the under. I didn't think their odds were worth taking a stab at. And a lot of games this year I picked against them. I went on record as saying I was all over the Saints last week. So now I'm going to take a pause for the cause and tell you that I'm going to go all in on the Bucks this week for a couple of reasons. One, they're more than 4.5 points favorite. 4.5 points better than Carolina. And if not for getting their absolute butts handed to them last Sunday night, this probably would be in the 6 or 7 or higher range. So the line to me is an overreaction to last week. And, even though you love beating down on the Bucks and beating down on Brady, everybody knows I like the Dolphins, so it comes easily. Brady is Brady. He's 7-1 against the spread coming off losses of 20 points or more in his career. 19-6 against the spread is after a double-digit loss, including 16-3 since 2003. And this is like a numbers versus narrative thing, and one of my buddies looked at, in our stats information department looked this up for me. In a game after a loss in which his team failed to cover the spread by more than 2 touchdowns, so they were about a 5-point favorite and lost by 1 million, so they failed to cover by more than 2 touchdowns. He's covered in 11 straight regular season games and 18-2 in his last 20. So you can also throw all those things out the window if you want and just do the eye test. They beat them last time, and it was a little bit of a luck cover because Leonard Fournette broke one at the end, so they probably shouldn't have covered against the Panthers that one. But Carolina just lost McCaffrey again, even though they played well with Mike Davis. I get it. The Bucs are going to be angry. They've now played 2 consecutive horrible games. They shouldn't have beat the Giants, and they got their butts kicked by the Saints. To me, this is put up or shut up time. You have Brady, you have Antonio Brown, you have Gronk, Evans, and they had the same guys they had last week when they got killed. So I'm not telling you anybody knew that they have, but they were embarrassed last week. And Tom Brady does not like to get embarrassed. Tom Brady was loving the limelight 2 weeks ago when his team's doing good and Belichick's team's doing bad. It was a reality check for them last week that they're not going to be handed the NFC Championship trophy like everybody was giving it to them a week ago as the best team in the NFC. It was a reality check that the Saints are better, although the third time they play, maybe in the NFC title game, it could be different. I just think that in this position, and my buddy texted me at halftime of the Sunday night game saying, I would not want to be in a Carolina Panther uniform next week. So taking that for what it is, sometimes there's numbers, sometimes there's narratives. In this case, I think the numbers and the narratives are lining up where you don't want to be facing an angry Tom Brady, but the Bucs are also the better team. So I suspect after 2 bad weeks, one of which they won, they will come out here and show what they're all about. And again, I'm not picking them to win the NFC. I'll probably continue fading them later in the year. I love doing it after they're off a big win because then you get a good price. But in my mind, the Bucs are going to win this one, and they'll probably win it fairly easily.
All right. Well, that's a big take right there. Mm-hmm. And I actually took this at 6.5 for Carolina. The spread moved, obviously, and it's kind of big. It went through the somewhat key number of 6, and it's inching towards the 4 here. I thought Tampa Bay was a little bit exposed against the Saints. I think the Vita Vea injury was kind of what exposed them, and because they couldn't stop Taysom Hill just plowing through the line. And that was just like the whole second half, really. I don't know if they're deflated or whatever by then. Deflated, we're talking about Tom Brady, funny. But it was an interesting just to see how that Tampa Bay looked, that just couldn't even come back in that game. They had no shot. Tom Brady was just getting sacked. And you're right. Those trends that you threw out against Tom Brady are very, very frightening. But one thing I will say is that Carolina, for some reason, that their offense is a little bit better than Tom Brady in the Bucs. They're averaging 6.0 yards per play to Tampa Bay's 5.5. Now, they give up 5.7 yards per play, and Tampa Bay only gives up 4.9. So Tampa Bay does have a slight yards per play advantage there if you're looking from a metrics standpoint when you're at this game. Christian McCaffrey's out, and I just saw that tweet. He should be out. they shouldn't play him this game. You don't push it with your star talent like that. You still got Bridgewater in there, and Davis is doing a fine job there. So I think this spot. One of the reasons I like Carolina, they are also in a somewhat of a revenge spot. You're right. That was a little misleading. 21-17 or 24-17. It should have been 31-17 is how it finished. But what I also like is Matt Rule and how the Panthers have been playing very tough. And so at 6, I definitely thought the number was too high. At 4.5, I would still make a small play on Carolina, but it would be smaller. And if it goes past 4, I don't have a play at all in this game. So there you go. One thing I do wonder with those trends, a lot of people were making jokes about how Antonio Brown is now on the Bucks. I mean, is that a good thing, David, or is that a bad thing?
It's too early to tell. I think people overvalued how much of an impact he's going to make. They got enough weapons. I don't really think they need him. And, all the points you brought up about the Panthers are extremely valid, and I don't fault anybody for being on that side of it, especially considering how often I've been fading Tampa and screaming it last week that the Saints were the play. I was actually on the Panthers last time they played the Bucs, and that Fournette touchdown, was not something I was happy with. So I felt like I was on the right side, wrong result. But in this case, like, you're also right. Teddy Bridgewater, 21-4 ATS is an underdog. So there are numbers and narratives that will fit. You can do this all day on both sides of every game. I just think it's, to me, a revenge spot of epic proportions. And I do take those numbers with a grain of salt because he is on a different team. And should Tom Brady have gone to the Jaguars, it would not mean as much. Hey, he's 7-1 after getting his butt kicked. Okay, but he's on the Jaguars. It's different. But you're on arguably a team that's built with more talent than anything he had in New England, and they are a good team. They are going to be in the playoffs. They are going to be there at the end, and they're playing a team that is now missing their running back again, and they have a rookie head coach, and they hung with him last time, and it would not surprise me if they hung with him this time. I like this spot for Brady, and I don't say that often, even though I've witnessed it enough times. Most notably 2 years ago when they were 1-2, hosting the 3-0 Miami Dolphins, and it's like, the torch is being passed. The Dolphins are the new division, and they went out there and crushed the Dolphins. So there are spots where Tom Brady looked at this and says, just like, when you slight Nick Saban or you slight Bill Belichick, just get out of the way. And that's unfortunately what you might get on Sunday.
All right, no, fair enough. That's cool. We haven't had many disagreements, so I like what you said there. And so, let's move on to a game that hits a little bit closer to home for you, David. We have the LA Chargers versus the Miami Dolphins. Miami is at -2.5 and starting to creep up to 3 there. The total on this game is 48. And I'm going to be honest with you, David. I faded the Dolphins last week, and I was wrong. I was wrong because Tua got them back in the game when they were down by 7. And that's when you thought you might have a winner, and the Cardinals kind of choked it as well. But the weird thing about Miami, they've been outgained the last couple games, but the defense have scored in the past couple games. So this Dolphins team is exciting. And I think that you have to be pretty excited for what they have coming down the road.
I am, and the future is bright. They have the salary cap space, they have the draft picks from Houston, and they have the quarterback of the future, and everything is looking up. And in normal years, this is a spot where I'd be like, all right, the Dolphins are going to be the Dolphins, and after making everybody think they're good, they'll go ahead and lose to somebody they shouldn't lose. But this is a different team. If you look at last week's game, which you were not in the minority there, a lot of people looked at Tua's first start as not being impressive. The defense and special teams couldn't do that again. They're playing the Cardinals off a bye, blah, 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 blah. All the Dolphins went in there with is they were missing 5 assistant coaches. They were missing the top 2 running backs on their roster. They got injuries to their second best receiver in the second quarter, among other players that left. And they went neck and neck with one of the more exciting teams in the league with Kyler Murray in Arizona. And on the road, they went ahead and took that from them while being, as you said, a touchdown down. So taking the fandom aside, I am a believer in Brian Flores and this team. I think that they're going to make a run to the playoffs. The schedule is set up for them. And I think that in this one, you're only laying 2.5 points against a team that just does not know how to win. You can say that a lot about college teams that are young. You can say that about some other sports where teams haven't been in the limelight. The Chargers have proven time and time again they just don't know how to close out games. And, 2.5 would not be enough for me to take. And I made that argument last week when I was all over Las Vegas, which of course, it came down to the last play that was dropped in the end zone and overturned. But the theory was right. It's a pick'em game or a 1-point game. Is that enough to be on the LA Chargers, considering how often they have blown leads? No, and you got away with it last week. But I'm in the same boat this week. Now LA is going all the way across the country to play Miami, and I think the Dolphins are the better team. And Tua showed last week a little bit more of what he can do. The defense is very, very good. They couldn't stop Kyler Murray, but Justin Herbert does not have the legs that Kyler Murray has, so he should be fine there. And the other thing that has been under the radar, and he's going to win it again this week, is special teams. The kicker won Special Teams Player of the Week, the month. He'll win it again. Sanders and Hack is the punter. They have very good special teams, which when you're not the best team in the league, but you're the youngest team in the league and you're challenging week in and week out, having the ability to kick 50-yard field goals and punt down to the 2-yard line every time is something that definitely helps your defense and your offense out. And if that continues, then, the Dolphins, in theory, should be favored in each of their next 4 games against the Chargers, Broncos, Bengals, and Jets. And then you're just looking at a completely different team by then.
Oh, man. Yeah, you broke it down. You said everything that I have written down. The only thing I have to add is I have it exactly 2.75 points in my power rings, but I can't bet the Chargers and Lynn in this spot again. Flores is just a much better coach than Anthony Lynn, in my opinion. Now, if Lynn gets fired, I'll have to bet on the Chargers just on that, fired coach spot, just because, the team will play better that next game. Usually it's a trend I like to go with in college and even in the pros sometimes. But, both teams have their injury rows. Joey Bosa, Brian Bulaga for them, and Preston Williams and Myles Gaskin for Miami. But I can see Miami winning this game by 3 and lean to Miami from me.
And you mentioned a good thing about the coaching, and I watched every play of the game last week. And you can talk about Tua, you can talk about the defense. At the end of the day, Brian Flores severely outcoached Cliff Kingsbury, and that was obvious many, many points during the game. Some of the plays that Cliff called and some of the things that they did, he got outcoached by Brian Flores, and I would expect that to happen again this week.
100%. We have a couple minutes left. Let's hit these last two. San Fran versus New Orleans. New Orleans minus 9.5 now. The total on this game is 50.5, and I'll start right here. I took New Orleans, and I took a -9, and its spread went to 9.5 for a reason, and I think it was some of the reasons that I still was thinking about. The 49ers right now, they're in shambles, and this team doesn't have a pass rush whatsoever. And the Saints, just like you said earlier, are really catching their midseason groove. Nick Mullins, I thought he was a good replacement, and he was the very first game he played. I think it was against the Giants or something. But his QBR is a dismal 38.6 this year. That's in the range of Dwayne Haskins and Sam Darnold. That's low. And the Saints are finally healthy with Miles Sanders and Thomas, back. Mm-hmm. They have Taysom Hill worked a lot last week, so not a lot of fatigue on Drew Brees yet. This is interesting because the 49ers are the best running team, and you look what happened last year. The Niners beat them 48-46, and don't think for 1 second then Sean Payton doesn't remember that. That guy is the kind of guy that's going to hold that grudge to me. And I just don't think the Niners even have a chance. So I laid the under double-digit spread here because I think it's a 2-score game. Well, the average of 2 scores is 10 points. You can do 14, 10, or 6. I like it under 10, and that's my play. Any thoughts?
I agree with you there. It's not one that I'm going to be high on, but this game could absolutely work out the exact same way last Thursday worked out with the Packers and Niners. You have the Packers and Saints are very, very similar with the way their offenses are. And their defenses are, to me, very, very close. And you have the same opponent here in the Niners who could do absolutely nothing to keep up with the Packers in the first half. And then they had a little success late to go over the total late in that game, but it was a blowout. It was over by then. It's tough to lay anywhere close to double digits in the NFL, but if you are going to do it, spots to do it are against teams that are injury ravaged and teams that don't have a quarterback. And the 49ers are both. You mentioned all the Nick Mullen stats. Their defense is completely torn up, and it's amazing they've actually won 4 games, and then you remember that they played back-to-back games in the Meadowlands versus the Jets and Giants, and it doesn't surprise you anymore. I only worry about a letdown. You're coming off playing at Tampa on Sunday night and then facing the 49ers, but you mentioned the revenge factor from last year could play into there. The Saints are just a better team, and they're in a position where they're going to continue to roll, protect from the letdown, and even if there is a letdown, the 49ers really have nothing to bring to the table anyway. You have to bring something if there's going to be a letdown, and I don't see them scoring any more than, in the teens, and the Saints are going to put up 30 every single week, as they have. They're averaging over 30 points per game, which is why all their games go over the total. And so I'd probably play the over again, but I would lay the 9.5 if forced to pick it.
All right, my man. Glad we're on the same side with that. This last game, I really didn't want to have to discuss it, but my Bears, man. They're so fortunate to have 5 wins right now. They're hosting the Vikings, and it's flipped. I bet you about 3-4 weeks ago, the Bears are a 4 or 5 point favorite. Well, they are a 2.5 point dog, and that is a massive reaction to what we saw with the offense. But I don't even know how you can make the Bears a favorite in really any game when their offense looks that bad. They had the Tennessee team last week that has one of the worst defenses in the league. They didn't even put up a point the first half. Man, that's awful. People were just screaming to get rid of Mitch Trubisky and put in Nick Foles. I hate to say it, but that looks even worse than what Mitch had.
I was on the show with you before the season started, and I've been on the show with you a couple of times since. And you know that my only play in the offseason was Bears under 8.5 win total. And when you guys started off 4-1, it was, point at me and laugh. And I have a good buddy of mine that works in the sports betting field as a huge Bears fan, and he was, making fun of it because the Bears just kept winning. And I said, listen, you might be 4-1, 5-1, whatever it is. You did beat the Bucs on the night game, and you had a couple of come from behind out of nowhere wins against the Falcons and Lions, but you're not a 5-1 football team. And as you've seen in the last 3 weeks, Mitchell Trubisky either is missing his arm completely or he's done something really bad to be in the doghouse, because what you've seen out of Nick Foles, you almost have to go back to Trubisky at this point. So I don't really like this game at all, and I'm hoping I'm in a position on Monday where I don't have to play it. Maybe I'll find a prop or two, which is what I like to do on Monday nights. Nagy's 4-0 versus the Vikings. You can't really hide from that. The Vikings are one of the weirdest teams in the NFL this year because they're a team that looked beyond awful for the first 3 weeks, and it would not surprise me after Week 17 to see them grab the 7th spot in the playoffs just because they have that talent. Dalvin Cook is unstoppable right now, and we didn't mention it earlier, but he absolutely could be an MVP consideration. I just don't like either side in this game because both teams are Jekyll and Hyde. I don't see how you take the Bears, but at the same time, laying points on the road with a team that was getting its butt kicked a few weeks ago was also hard to do. So in this business, we are allowed to say the word pass, and I gave you a whole bunch of reasons why, and I'm going to be passing and hoping I can find a prop or two to entertain myself with.
Unfortunately, the sports books can't pass, and that's our option. It gives us a little bit of a somewhat of an advantage here. Yeah, you said it. I mean, the Bears are a dog at 2.5, and please don't go to 4. Because that might make me have to force a play here that I don't want to make. It's a division game. But like the quarterbacks you mentioned, I mean, look what else they did. Daniels and Glennon. Look at the 4 quarterbacks they've hired over the past 4 or 5 years. I mean, that's just terrible GMs. It's beyond reprehensible the way this offense was built. Their offensive line was bad before they even got injured. And now they got some guys in COVID protocol. On offense, I think they might be getting Cody Whitehair back, but Simmons, their backup tackles in COVID protocol. They lost James Daniels earlier. And Nick Foles, to be honest with you, has more time than I expected to throw the ball, but he can't really hit anybody. It's like he's lost out there. You hire Matt Nagy from Kansas City thinking you're getting an offensive mind, yet your offense got worse from last year, believe it or not. I mean, only the Bears can make that happen. Go from really bad to despicable. You can tell.
And I think the verdict is still out on Nagy because I want to compare it but contrast it to Adam Gase in Miami, where you had the quarterback whisperer, offensive genius there, and you gave him a quarterback in Tannehill, and now Darnold, and you gave him weapons, and he absolutely did nothing with it. And question now, 2 different jobs in, whether Adam Gase is an offensive genius and QB whisperer. The verdict's still out on Matt Nagy because they have not given Matt Nagy anything to work with. I know they traded up for Trubisky. He's terrible. They went and traded for Foles. He's awful. You mentioned Chase Daniels and other knuckleheads. Awful. You don't want to say it as a Bears fan as you are, but Matt Nagy at his next head coaching job, surrounded by a quarterback and talent, may prove to be the coach you wanted. But if the Bears don't change their philosophy and their GM doesn't get Matt Nagy help, he's going to go down with the ship, just like any of the other coaches that have not had help before, where you looked at Adam Gase and Tannehill has proven that he can do it with the right coaching, which makes Gase look worse. But the Nagy situation, I was a fan of the hire, but they haven't given him anything to work with, unlike L.A., who gave McVay, Goff, and Woods, and Todd Gurley for a while, and they at least gave him weapons. You got to give Matt Nagy more than, hey, I'm going to flip a coin to see if Trubisky or Foles is going to cost me the week this week.
Yeah, but you also notice Matt Nagy making some bad decisions out there. He's doing bad clock management. His running plays are awful. Credit to Montgomery that the offensive line can't run block. That's true. But at the same time, he should have used Mitch's legs more. He should have made Mitch when he a couple years ago had over 500 yards rushing, and they won 12 games, and then instead he's sitting there trying to force plays, and it's like, dude, you're fast, Mitch. You're big. You're fast. What are you doing? It's you see Mahomes run. You see Lamar Jackson run. They run. They run a lot. They get 5 to 15 yards, and he was capable of that. But I kind of blame Nagy from trying to make Mitch into something he's not. But right. Yeah, it's a mess from the beginning because Ryan Pace is just a little bit clueless, and a lot of people give him credit for the Mac trade. Well, first of all, the Bears were the only ones in position to make that trade, and they lost 2 first-round draft picks for that. It's not like we got Mac for free, not to mention paid him a ton of money, so anybody could have made that move. I'm obviously really down on Ryan Pace. I lean Vikings -2.5, but it's going to go up past that most likely, and maybe you buy back on the Bears if you're cute and try to get a middle. I think whoever gets the last pass interference call in their way is going to cover this spread and possibly win this game. But it's one that I want to stay away from as well. I
would tell you that if it does reach the other side of that number, I at that point I become interested. Anytime you get a team getting over the magic number of 3 with a hook or 4 at home versus a not so good Vikings team, I'd probably jump just like you would. But for now, no thanks.
Yes, absolutely. And I still think your under 9.5 is looking good at the Bears being 5-4. Unfortunately, they play Jacksonville, but that doesn't mean they can score a point. So we'll see what happens when it comes to that one. Is there any quick games you want to throw out there in college or NFL?
I'll stick with the NFL since that's what we're talking about. I like the Ravens this week to put the Patriots out of their misery. If anybody watched the Monday night game 2 nights ago, you couldn't have liked what you've seen out of the Patriots. That's who they are. And Lamar 11-2-2 on the road. I think the Ravens, if they've done anything the last 2 years, they've beaten up on poor defenses, and that's what you're getting out of New England. And the other one, I'll go a little bit of a tighter game. I think the Rams hosting Seattle off a bye week. Seattle's defense is atrocious, and I think that the Rams can throw up some points, even though they looked horrible against the Dolphins and they've had some other struggles this year. This is what the doctor ordered for Goff and company, is a Seattle defense that is really non-existent. So I expect the Rams, and it's only about a point and a half. I expect them to beat up on Seattle.
Great stuff there, man. And I have one of those games on your site as a premium play as well. Well, awesome stuff, David. As usual, where can our listeners go to find your great columns?
Sure. Our content and columns are on ESPN.com's Chalk site. You can get it in the app under More Sports, or if you just go to ESPN.com Chalk in your Google bar, it'll pop up. We will have our college football best bets, as well as Stanford Stephen the Bears column tomorrow. And on Friday, we'll have our at least one thing we pick on every single Sunday NFL game. That'll be up on Friday morning. Of course, tomorrow we'll also have our Thursday night picks. And on Sunday, we'll have our Monday night picks. All the Sunday picks will be up on Friday at the site. We'll also have picks on the Masters are out right now, UFC and others at ESPN Chalk, or I tweet them out all the time, as you mentioned earlier. D Bearman, ESPN.
Make sure you guys check that out. Thank you so much for your time, Dave.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Make sure you check out David's columns for the Masters coming up this weekend. Looks like DeChambeau is the favorite at 8-1, but he might have a few good nuggets in there at ESPN.com. Now it's time to move into the Refuse to Lose teaser. And we are now 6-3 with this teaser. We're going to take Bills all the way up to plus 8.5 at Arizona. Going through some key numbers of 3, 6, and 7 there. No brainer on that one. And we are going to take the Ravens down to -1 playing the hopeless Patriots, who is very injured, and Cam Newton can only do so much. So we love that teaser, and we're going to give that out for 2 stars. Next, we have our Bow to the Gambling Gods Parlay, which is 2-5 so far. We hit last week's. Hopefully we can keep this train rolling, but we're going to go for a big one here, one that pays out 10-1, and there's a couple ATS involved to do that. There's 2 ATS plays. I'm going to take East Carolina plus 27.5 at Cincinnati. Cincinnati's in a look-ahead spot to UCF, and we're going to take that Tulane -5 here, wrap it in this parlay. The other legs are going to be NC State -345 against Florida State. We're going to use USC -614, obviously against Arizona. We're going to do Nevada -928. I believe they play, unfortunately, New Mexico. You heard what Bearman had to say about that. We are going to use San Jose State -735. I believe they play UNLV. And 2 NFL plays. We're going to take the Saints at -443 and the Baltimore Ravens at -328. This all pays 10-1. Remember just to use your fun money on parlays. Best of luck to everyone. And now it is time for
The Sharp Side of the Force.
The Sharp Side of the Force is brought to you by uwager.eu. For a 50% sign-up bonus, please visit uwager and use the promo code ODDSBREAKERS. Terms and conditions apply. Let's move on to Sharp College. As of Wednesday afternoon, Sharp money's on Iowa -2.5 to -3.5 at Minnesota. 51% of the tickets on Iowa and 69% of the money. Move through that key number of 3. Sharp money on Marshall -23.5. Hosting Middle Tennessee State, 50% of the tickets on Marshall, but 95% of the money. Sharp money on West Virginia, -2 to -3, hosting TCU. 71% of the tickets on West Virginia, 96% of the money. Bit of dual action there. Sharp money on Kentucky, -17, hosting Vandy. 45% of the tickets on Kentucky and 82% of the money. Not sure about that one. Sharp money on Illinois +6.5 at Rutgers. 17% of the tickets are on Illinois and 55% of the money. Sharp money on Houston -13.5 to -14, hosting South Florida. 59% of the tickets are on Houston and 83% of the money is on Houston. Sharp money on UAB -13.5, hosting North Texas. 49% of the tickets on UAB and 74% of the money. Sharp money on USC -12.5 to -14. 55% of the tickets on USC and 84% of the money. Sharp money on Georgia Tech +7.5 down to +6.5, hosting Pitt. 33% of the tickets are on Georgia Tech and 66% of the money. Sharp money on Wisconsin Pick'em to -4.5 at Michigan. Dual action, 68% of the tickets on Wisconsin, 85% of the money. And I took Wisconsin at Pick'em, gave it out. So it's past the 3 right now, so I can say that. Sharp money on Utah -2.5 to -3.5 at UCLA. 68% of the money on Utah, or 68% of the tickets on Utah, 87% of the money. Sharp totals. Iowa at Minnesota, over 55 to 58. 61% of the tickets are on the over. 97% of the money is on the over. Sharp money totals on Army versus Tulane, under 50 to 47.5. 42% of the tickets on the under. 77% of the money. Sharp money on Middle Tennessee State versus Marshall, over 55 to 57. 65% of the tickets on the over, 97% of the money. Sharp money on Georgia State versus Appalachian State, under 64.5 down to 62.5. 44% of the tickets on the under and 95% of the money. Sharp money on Ohio State at Maryland over 70 to 74.5. 52% of the tickets are on the over and 89% of the money. Unfortunately, that baby just got canceled, and we had over 70.5, so big bummer on that one. Sharp money on Colorado versus Stanford, under 58 down to 54. 44% of the tickets on the under, 97% of the money. Sharp money on Baylor versus Texas Tech, under 60 down to 57.5. 55% of the tickets on the under, 99% of the money. Sharp money on Hawaii versus San Diego State, over 51 to 52.5. 27% of the tickets on the over and 75% of the money. Sharp money on Oregon at Washington State, under 60 down to 57. 19% of the tickets on the under and 88% of the money. Sharp money on Washington versus Oregon, under 57 all the way down to 52.5. 56% of the tickets are on the under and 97% of the money. Pretty big move there. Sharp money on Utah versus UCLA, over 57.5 to 59.5. 58% of the tickets are on the over and 90% of the money. NFL Week 10, and we have sharp money as of Wednesday afternoon on the Packers, minus 13, hosting Jacksonville. 43% of the tickets on the Packers, 63% of the money. Sharp money on Panthers, plus 6.5, down to plus 4.5. 63% of the tickets are on the Panthers and 76% of the money, but some buyback coming in now. Sharp money on Dolphins, minus 2.5, hosting the Chargers. 58% of the tickets on the Dolphins and 87% of the money. Sharp money on the Saints, minus 7 to minus 9.5, hosting the Niners. 72% of the tickets are on the Saints and 92% of the money. Some dual action there. Sharp NFL totals. Jaguars versus Packers, under 55 all the way down to 51. 57% of tickets are on the under and 81% of the money is on the under. Sharp money on Bucks versus Panthers, over 47 to 50.5. 66% of the money on the over. 97% of the money is on the over. Sharp money on the Bills versus Cardinals, over 49 all the way to 55. 65% of the tickets on the over, 94% of the money. Sharp money on Seahawks versus Rams, over 53.5 to 55.5. 47% of the tickets on the over, 79% of the money. And sharp money on the Vikings versus Bears, over 45. 43% of the tickets are on the over and 86% of the money. Wow, that's not an easy over to take. And they expect the Bears to score some points here, apparently. Not sure I'll be a buyer on that one as of right now. My friends, thank you so much for listening to this podcast. We'd really appreciate it if you can give us a big review and let us know if you want any games broken down for next week. Have a great rest of your weekend and go get some winners.